Hello everyone listening to the Girl with the Curly Hair project. My name is Nele and today I will take you through something about shapeshifting and Asperger's syndrome and females. Most people, when they think of shapeshifters, they think of people who can change their physical form into something else or morph their physical form into whatever they want to be. How does this relate to Asperger's syndrome and females, you may wonder? Actually, it works quite well. Let me start from the beginning. As someone with Asperger's syndrome and female, when I was young, I was quite the observer. I would observe people in every way. I would observe how they use their tone of voice, how they use their facial expressions, how they would use their hands, how they would stand, how they would act, laugh, etc., etc. And when I did that, I processed all of those inputs, all those sensory inputs, and tried to understand why they did this. That way, I have what I call character build-up. So I have observed someone entirely and I understand why it is they do certain things, so I can form a character in my head. I do this with multiple people, so I have several character build-ups in my head, and every character build-up is different. They all have their own talents, their own voices, their own expressions, etc., etc., etc. Now, when you have Asperger's syndrome as a female, you are quite awkward. You don't really fit in anywhere because you react very differently than your peers. I found this incredibly hard when I was in high school. For example, people or a group of girls I would hang out with would ask me, "What do you want to do?" The question was always so overwhelming to me that I always said, "I don't know," which irked them to no end. So I started pretending I was someone else because obviously who I really was of no use or it would annoy people. So I went through my character build-ups and I would use one of them. Now you have to understand, when in a group of people, this process right now for me as an adult goes so fast. I observe, I understand, I make a character build-up. I do this at an incredibly high rate. So it might be that the first time you see me, I will be quiet, but the second time you see me, I will have had a character build-up and I can be someone that fits your needs, because that's what I do. This is my form of shape-shifting. So whenever I meet someone new, I observe. That's the first thing I do. I'm very quiet, I'm introvert, I observe. Then I start to figure out why they do certain stuff. Why do they use their tone of voice? Why are they passive aggressive? Why do they say the things they do? Why do they use their verbal expressions? Why do they use their body language, etc., etc. That way I can form a picture of that person, the character. I also then start figuring out what their needs are. So I start mirroring myself onto it. I really become them, so to speak, but as a matter of fact, I'm projecting their needs. So that's my way of making myself important in their lives. So when you have someone, for example, who needs a very firm touch, who needs a lot of structure and who needs someone very dominant, I will firstly observe this, then I will understand why they need that, and then I will fill in their gaps. So I chameleonize myself, so to speak. I shapeshift myself to fit their needs. I become someone entirely different. How is this negative? First of all, when I say I go out with a group of people or I go with someone and I have to do this, I'm uncomfortable being myself, so I shapeshift into something they need. I do things that I find that work against me, that I find unethical, that I find hard to deal with. However, in that moment, I do not realize it because I have shapeshifted completely. I have become a different person. I have become the person to fit their needs. So when I then come home and I no longer have to be that person to fit their needs, I become Nele again, and I wonder about what I've just done because it is literally not me. This is very hard to deal with, and I know a lot of ASPI females struggle with this because they feel they lose their very essence. They find it very hard to return to their own core, to their own being, their own self. They feel like they're shape-shifting all the time to please people, to make them feel like they are worth something, to make them feel as if they belong somewhere. That this is very hard to return to. The second point that isn't so good about this is that we use this to boost our own self-esteem. However, it's a bit ambiguous. We become someone else entirely. You know, Nele will be gone, I will become someone else entirely to fit their needs, their desires, their wants. By that, I make myself important in their life, so I feel good about myself, except it's not myself, it's the shape-shifting self of me. So the whole complement of being worth something in someone else's life isn't really seeping through. However, it's not all bad, of course. Being this shapeshifter also allows me to always put myself into other people's shoes. I find this incredibly valuable, especially in my line of work. I work as a social care therapist. I will always observe people. Always. I will always try and understand where they are coming from, because otherwise I cannot shapeshift to their needs. But that also gives me an incredible sense of understanding of what other people want and need. And I can always pick into that. I'm very diplomatic because of that, and I will always hit the nail on the nail, so to speak, when it comes to that. And that is something incredibly valuable in this society where it is often underestimated, or where we often, give people our advice but forget to understand the real issue. My advice would be to find a balance. It's really good to observe people for ASPIs, because that way we learn to understand. You cannot understand without the observation part. It is ever so critical. However, we have to keep in mind that it is okay to be awkward, and it is okay to be weird. And we don't have to shapeshift into someone else and feel bad about ourselves afterwards because we have no clue who we are, because we are so many people all at once, because we shapeshift all the time. There's an incredibly positive thing about this observing and understanding that we ASPI females are incredibly good at, but we have to keep in mind not to let it overtake ourselves. We have to make sure to accept ourselves and to be our awkward little selves, because that's what we need. And what we need is just as much important as what the person across us needs. Thank you for listening, and keep tuned for more.